Okay, let's dive in. We've got a significant stack of articles here from a recent edition of The Economist.
Yeah, quite a pile. Covers a lot of ground, doesn't it? Finance, tech, global politics.
Exactly, everything.
Yeah.
So our mission today is really to cut through all that information, pull out the absolute must-know insights.
The key takeaways.
Yeah.
And maybe some surprising facts, too, because there are definitely a few of those in there.
Right. Things that help you understand how the world is really changing, like right now.
Think of it as a snapshot, maybe? A quick tour across this landscape that's, well, constantly being redrawn.
We're going to guide you through the essential themes, the details found in this material, so you can get well-informed pretty quickly.
Sounds good. Where are we starting?
Let's start right at the engine room, global finance, particularly what's happening on Wall Street.
Yes. Because the sources, they really paint a picture of a sector undergoing a pretty radical transformation.
Yeah, fundamentally shifting away from, let's say, traditional banking, as most of us probably understand it.
And the core insight there, I think, is this huge shift of power and just activity, really, away from the familiar big banks.
The regulated ones?
Exactly. Towards what they call non-bank financial institutions. So firms doing banking-like things, but, under different rules.
Okay, so who are these new heavyweights then?
Well, the sources really shine a light on the major asset managers, the private equity firms. Names you've probably heard.
Like Apollo, Blackstone.
Apollo, Blackstone, KKR, yeah. Those are the big ones mentioned. And their scale is just breathtaking.
We're talking huge numbers, right?
Huge. Hundreds of billions, even trillions of dollars. Apollo was cited at, $674 billion in assets under management as of May 2025.
Mm-hmm.
Blackstone actually crossed the trillion-dollar mark, $1.1 trillion.
Wow.
And KKR wasn't far behind, like $785 billion. That kind of scale just gives them immense influence.
And it's not just managing money for clients, is it? They're doing more.
No, exactly. They're actively stepping into roles that banks used to dominate. And this shows up most clearly, I think, in the massive growth of private credit.
Private credit. So that's basically lending done directly by these non-banks, bypassing the traditional loan process.
That's pretty much it. Direct lending. And it might sound kind of niche, but the examples in the sources, they show just how big it's become.
Like the Dell example.
Yeah, Apollo was involved in a $200 billion loan linked to the bid for Dell Technologies. I mean, that's a staggering amount of direct lending.
And the analysis suggests this market is just going to keep growing.
Projected to get much larger, yeah.
Okay, so this brings up the big question, which the sources dig into. Why? Why this huge shift?
Well, a major driver they point to is regulation, specifically the changes that came in after the 2008 financial crisis.
Right, making banking safer, but also more complex.
Safer, yes, but also more complex, more capital intensive, and maybe less profitable in certain lending areas. So these non-bank lenders saw an opportunity.
Less regulation for them.
Less regulation, definitely. And the appeal of potentially higher yields in private credit. It's also described as maybe a more flexible, more relationship-based kind of lending sometimes.
So traditional banks are a bit constrained by the new rules, while these non-banks are more agile, stepping into that lending space.
Precisely. But, whenever you have a major financial shift like this, especially one involving less oversight.
The big question is always risk.
Always risk, exactly. And the sources raise some serious concerns here.
Like what specifically?
Well, questions about transparency, for one. Private markets. It's just harder to see what's really going on compared to public markets.
Okay.
There's concern about concentrated risk, too. These huge direct loans, if one goes bad.
It could tie up a lot of capital.
Right? And critically, they ask whether this whole rewired system, as one piece called it, is actually robust enough. Can it handle a proper economic downturn, a recession?
And they draw parallels to the time before 2008.
They do. And that comparison, that parallel to the risks before the 2008 crisis, well, it's a pretty stark warning from the material, isn't it?
It really makes you pause. Were there other financial currents mentioned, even briefly?
Yeah, they did flag the rapid growth and potential risks around ETFs, exchange-traded funds.
Oh, right. What was the concern there?
Well, the piece used the phrase ETF madness, which tells you something, specifically highlighting worries about funds built on really complex derivatives.
So complicated financial contracts.
Yeah, intricate stuff, and especially those ETFs designed for high speculation. So another area to watch, apparently.
Okay, let's shift gears completely now. Away from the mechanics of finance, the sources also dive deep into, well, the equally complex world of global power dynamics. politics.
Right. And the analysis here looks at a world that's, grappling with some big shifts in power, really complicated relationships between the major players.
What about the U.S. position?
Well, one point made was about uncertainty. Uncertainty surrounding U.S. foreign policy and how domestic political issues can really impact America's standing and actions globally.
And China. How is its role portrayed?
The sources spent quite a bit of time on China's expanding influence. They talked about things like the Belt and Road Initiative, of course, but also increased diplomatic engagement.
Like mediating disputes.
Exactly. Pointing to China's role in brokering that agreement between Saudi Arabia and Iran, it seems like China is actively trying to balance its global ambitions with its own internal economic focus.
Interesting balance. And where does that leave Europe in this picture?
Well, Europe's kind of in a challenging spot, isn't it? Trying to manage relationships with both the U.S. and China.
Right.
And the material highlights the EU's push to build its own industrial champions. The phrase used was an Airbus of everything.
Airbus of everything, meaning...
Meaning trying to foster strong European companies in really key strategic areas like AI, defense tech.
Yeah.
Basically to compete more effectively on the global stage. Less reliance, maybe.
It sounds like a very complex geopolitical triangle. Did the sources zoom in on any specific countries beyond the big powers?
They did. Offered some pretty sharp insights into unique situations. El Salvador, for instance, under President Bukele.
Yes. His situation is quite something. High approval, re-election.
Very high approval, yeah. And the sources detail the dramatic success in crushing the murder rate. That crackdown on gangs.
It was notoriously high before, wasn't it?
One of the highest in the world, yeah. And his policies, well, they've drastically changed that reality on the ground. But...
There's always a but.
There's a but. The sources also presented the other side. Serious concerns raised about human rights, democratic norms under his administration. So results, but at a potentially high cost to certain principles.
A clear trade-off being reported there. Okay, what about Ukraine?
The focus there was really on the ongoing challenges of the war, especially air defense.
Still a major issue.
Huge. They lay out what Ukraine is facing day to day, these persistent drone and missile attacks, and how critically reliant they are on Western systems. Patriot missiles were specifically mentioned.
And the need is ongoing.
Continuous need for more capability. That's underscored as absolutely essential.
Okay. And closer to home for some listeners, the UK's National Health Service, the NHS, also got a mention.
It did. The sources described pretty significant pressures on the NHS. Things like, the long waiting lists, huge operational challenges.
Yeah, you hear about that a lot.
And one piece, quite strikingly, framed the situation as a point of national embarrassment for the UK.
Wow, strong words. Okay, let's pivot again from geopolitics and national health systems to the, well, incredibly fast-moving world of technology, specifically AI.
Artificial intelligence. Yeah, the articles really dive into that intense competition, especially U.S. versus China, vying for leadership.
And the ultimate goal is artificial general intelligence, AGI.
That seems to be the prize, yes. AGI, AI that can understand and learn, kind of like a human. And you've got the big players lined up. OpenAI, Microsoft, Google in the U.S.
And in China.
Firms like Baidu, ByteDance. And crucially, the material emphasizes that both governments see AI as just immensely strategically important.
So it's not just about cool tech, it's a strategic race.
Absolutely, with potentially massive global implications.
Which brings us to jobs. What did the sources say about AI's impact on the job market? That's a huge worry for people.
It is, and the sources explore that, acknowledging the debate. One article actually used the phrase, "boy cries wolf."
Suggesting maybe the alarm is overstated.
Or at least that the picture is more nuanced. They presented different views on how automation and AI might change how we work, shift the demand for certain skills, rather than concluding that, mass unemployment is definitely right around the corner.
Okay, so maybe more evolution than revolution, according to that analysis.
Potentially. It's still very much an evolving picture.
Now, here's where the tech stories got really, genuinely unexpected and fascinating for me. Some surprising applications, like reading ancient scrolls.
Oh, this project is amazing, isn't it? The sources described using particle accelerators.
The things they use in physics research.
Exactly. Particle accelerators and AI to read these carbonized Herculaneum scrolls from Pompeii.
The ones burnt in the Vesuvius eruption.
Yeah, literally burnt solid. But this combination, high-tech scanning, AI analysis, it's letting researchers read them without unrolling them, potentially uncovering lost ancient texts. It's incredible.
Using particle accelerators for ancient history, that's just a wild combination.
It really is.
And they also mentioned art conservation in a similarly surprising way.
Yes, applying sophisticated science to restore and conserve old paintings. But the really unexpected bit, highlighted in the sources, was that some techniques being explored might actually come from research into snake venom.
Wait, snake venom? For art restoration?
I know, it sounds completely out of left field, doesn't it?
It really does.
And the sources also noted, sort of relatedly, the broader scientific interest in snake toxins themselves for potential medical uses, other applications, beyond just art conservation.
Wow. Okay, so from reshaping Wall Street and global power plays to reading ancient scrolls with physics tools and potentially using snake venom research for art, the range here is just incredible.
It really is.
Let's zoom out one last time and look at some of those broader societal and environmental trends that were highlighted, starting with younger generations and politics.
Yeah, the analysis looked at Gen Z and millennials, how their voting patterns seem to be, well, evolving.
What's driving that, according to the sources?
Factors like the economy, definitely, but also their engagement through social media. That seems to be really influential in shaping their political leanings. They even included some charts showing the trends.
Social media's impact is undeniable there. The sources also touched on immigration systems being under pressure.
They did, highlighting the sheer challenge many countries face in just processing the numbers of people arriving. The specific example given was the significant pressure on facilities in places like Lumpkin, Georgia, just because of the volume of arrivals.
Another system feeling the strain, and then climate change, specifically extreme heat.
Yes, the articles pointed to more intense, more frequent heat waves, particularly mentioned regions like India and South Asia.
And the consequence is more air conditioning.
Exactly. It's driving much wider adoption of AC, almost as a necessary adaptation. But then you hit the paradox, right?
Where's the piece explored?
Yeah. AC helps people cope, obviously, but it massively increases energy demand, which can contribute to emissions, even while countries like India and China are also, investing heavily in renewables. It's a really tricky cycle.
A difficult balance to strike. Okay, and finally, one last little trend noted was about accessing culture, museums.
Yeah, just a brief point about a move by museums to make more of their collections accessible. They have vast amounts of stuff in storage.
Right, most of it unseen.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So the trend is toward bringing more of that out, putting it on display. The V&A and the Science Museum were mentioned as examples of places doing this.
Okay, let's try and connect some of these dots now, because we've really bounced around finance, politics, tech, AI, society, climate.
Huge amount of ground, yeah.
But what's fascinating, and what the sources subtly suggest, is how interconnected all this stuff is.
Profoundly interconnected. You can't really separate them, can you? Decisions in finance definitely impact geopolitical stability.
And the AI race isn't just tech. It's strategic. It affects jobs, national power.
Climate trends directly hit societies, influence energy policy, which loops right back to finance and geopolitics again.
So understanding these complex, kind of overlapping dynamics, that's really valuable for you listening as you try to navigate this modern world.
Absolutely. There's a lot to process, but seeing how these pieces influence each other, that's key to getting that well-informed perspective the sources offer.
We really have deep dived into this stack, I think. Pulled out those crucial nuggets across a massive range of topics.
Hopefully given a good overview.
And as you reflect on all this journey through the sources, a world where finance is rewiring itself, global powers are shifting, tech is accelerating like crazy, societies face these new challenges, maybe consider this. What single issue from everything we've touched on do you think will have the most significant, maybe unexpected impact on your life in the coming years? Something to think about.